Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammang sanghang namasami. Welcome back, friends, to the continuation of this retreat on practicing for the destruction of the asavas. This morning, my intention is to speak a bit about establishing the practice in general in terms of right view, and then to give some tips or suggestions for practicing at home. Here's a quotation from the sutta. What is the cessation of the asavas, the defilements? When ignorance ceases, the asavas cease. The practice that leads to the cessation of the asavas is simply this noble eightfold path. That is, right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right immersion. That is, right meditation. When a noble disciple understands the asavas this way, they understand that this penetrative spiritual life is the cessation of the asavas, is the cessation of the defilements. There are several versions of causation. Some of them are focusing on how dukkha arises and how the cycle of rebirth arises and continues. And then there's another set of practices that is kind of like an upward going spiral, sequential conditions that are leading towards liberation. And one of the versions of that upward spiraling set of causations is about the Noble Eightfold Path, pointing out how each step on the path gives rise to the next step, bringing one close to Nibbana, right up to the entrance to awakening. Once a person gains a foothold in the noble path by getting hold of any of the factors of awakening, the factors of stream entry, then they would be called in the traditional text, they would be called a trainee. And then they would keep on practicing with this eightfold path until they come to their full awakening. In a few places in the text, we see a tenfold path, And that's the Eightfold Path, plus two more things that are experienced by a fully awakened person, an arahant, a noble one, or even by a Buddha. And that is the awakening itself and the knowledge of this awakening. So in this session, I want to suggest that if you want to practice properly on this Eightfold Path, you need to get a hold of your right view. That's the first step. Growing up, however we grew up, in whatever culture or belief system that we grew up in, we have some kind of an intuitive idea about what's real, what's important, where suffering comes from, how to get out of suffering, what the highest aspiration or the highest goal of life is. And for many of us, those it's a philosophy of life, but we may not even be aware of it, or we may be aware at a kind of like a superficial level. This voice of another, which is pointed out, there's a saying that for the arising of right view requires two things. One is the voice of another, and the other is wise reflection. So this other is the person who is accomplished, who's looked deeply, who's taken those ways of thinking that might be unexamined and not really understood clearly, and brought them into clear understanding, and then come to realization, and then is able to suggest an initial right view. I would express that as, say, try looking at it this way and see if this way of looking leads to more peace and love, less aggravation, and more freedom. And then the second step, that wise reflection, we have to watch internally our own experience, our own minds, and as we hold on to and try out this different way of thinking, how is it actually manifested for us? So, for example, you could take the Four Noble Truths not as a catechism or like an absolute statement that, I'm going to put these Four Noble Truths on my flag or my banner and march out into the world holding this banner of the Four Noble Truths, saying this is true, everything else is false, and I'm going to beat up anybody who thinks differently. No, that's not the way. The way is like a working hypothesis. So we're modern people, we're familiar with science, and so it's very easy for us to consider it in this way. Is suffering real or not? So we can look around, we can look within, we can say, do we sometimes feel aggravated, upset, ashamed, hurt, painful, difficult in 1,000 different ways? And then we can take the second noble truth. And okay, there's a theory. If I am hurting about something, it's because I'm craving something or clinging to something. So then when it hurts, we got to ask ourselves, what am I clinging to? What am I holding on to? What am I craving after? What is it that says the way things are right now is not okay? I want it to be different. What is it that says something? It could be my sense of my own safety, or my own position of being a respectable person or a good person, and then something happens that causes an insult to my self-image. And it's very upsetting. And then we could say, oh, I'm holding on to something. I'm holding on to this self-image. There's a famous story about the Ajahn Chah temple where a particular student who had been practicing as a monastic later on became, this was a Westerner practicing as a monastic with Ajahn Chah, and they became disillusioned and quit that tradition and converted to evangelical Christianity. And then they started doing a demonstration in front of the temple, carrying a banner and yelling about, saying, this is satanic, don't go here, you're going to go to hell if you go in there. And the other disciples were saying, Ajahn, you've got to do something about this. Can't you call the police and have that person taken away or something? And according to the story, Ajahn Chah said, well, maybe she's right. So in that way, the grave insult to the whole Buddhist practice, was right there. But Ajahn just, he didn't pick it up at all. He didn't undertake any disturbance whatsoever because he wasn't clinging into a dogmatic sense that mine is right and everything else is wrong. So then if we see what we're holding on to a self-image, holding on to a resentment, holding on to a desire, and if we let go of it, then we can experience a tremendous flood of relief as a big chunk of our suffering drops away. And we can know, when I let go of that part of what I was clinging to, that part of my dukkha dropped. And it's then at that point that one can become very enthusiastic for this Dhamma and want to practice more fully and want to let go of all the parts and all the bits that we are clinging to. And then it's like this journey of exploration that can go on for sometimes for years of investigating, going deeper and deeper within and finding more and more subtle and profound things that we were naturally clinging to, bringing those areas of craving and clinging up to our awareness for the purpose of being able to let go. And so then in that way, one who is an intermediate practitioner who's already become convinced that this Four Noble Truths is a good method, still might happen that from time to time something happens that is causing an upset, causing a depression, causing pain. And when that happens, rather than being disappointed and saying, well, maybe this path doesn't work after all, we can see, oh, here is the opportunity. This is like the outward boundary of what I've developed so far. And this is where I can work with this and go even further. It's similar to the way in science, some scientists can make a hypothesis that explains a lot. And there can develop a consensus among that scientists and their colleagues to use this hypothesis for the purpose of explanation. And they do more and more experiments to test out and see whether, is it really true? Does this hypothesis really explain reality? And they keep on testing and testing and testing. And then there will come a point in the evolution of science that some real phenomenon can be observed that is not explained by that hypothesis. And at that point, there needs to be a paradigm shift to come up with some refinement or even some new way of thinking that explains the new phenomenon that's been seen and observed. And so just this way, as we go along in the practice, someone who's encountered the Dhamma will still suffer sometimes. And when they do, this is their chance to do that creative, wise reflection, looking within, seeing if they can uncover something that they are still clinging to, something that they're craving for, something that they're dissatisfied with. They don't want it to be this way, they want it to be different. And then experiencing another level of letting go. So that's one of the parts of the right view. Another common part of the right view is what's called the 3 marks of existence, which is the impermanence, the unsatisfactoriness, and the not self. And I think I would describe those as being a kind of a way that we can talk to ourselves whenever something happens that triggers our agitation or excitement or dissatisfaction or going off the right path. We can do this self-talk in order to come out of being triggered and to come into tranquility and clarity. So then it's impermanent. So when you see, okay, it's been suggested, okay, here's a theory, is it permanent or impermanent? And so then you've got to do the reflection for yourself and find out, are some things really forever and never changing? Or is everything actually changing? Is there anything that you can rely on, that it's going to always be there? Even in our modern times, because of climate change, there's a lot about the way the natural world is supposed to be. And deep down, we have this assumption that nature has this goodness and beauty and stability, and nature is always going to be this way, and nature is going to take care of itself and going to nurture us and provide for us. And so then when we say that the characteristics of this world in terms of the seasons and the temperature and the weather and so forth, oh, it's impermanent. Yikes. That's really upsetting, really disturbing. People can get a lot of anxiety or depression, upset, or even their greediness or their anger and so forth can be triggered by seeing something that they have a very deep assumption that is permanent, and they find out, oh, it's not permanent after all. And then even looking closer and closer at it, we may find through our reflection in our practice of meditation, how constantly things are changing, how little there is to cling to. So then when that reactivity happens, is it because we thought something was going to be permanent? We thought something was always going to be there? You know, in the monastic form, we've got a lot of routines that we do to make our life less distracted. And so let's say the morning meditation starts at 5 o'clock, and people are supposed to be at their cushions and be settled and ready to go. And then, you know, somebody is late or they don't show up or something like that. You see, then even we can feel a disturbance. But if we realize, oh, it's impermanent. The schedule is impermanent. No need to cling to it. So you can't cling to anything, because how can you cling to a river that's always flowing? How can you cling to the wind? And then with that truth about dukkha, the second characteristic, the way it's given traditionally is to say, if there were something that was pleasant, that was also permanent and eternal, then you could cling to that, and that would be your refuge. But because nothing is permanent, if you cling to something that's impermanent, then you will be disappointed. So that this dukkha that's arising from that clinging, we experience this dukkha again and again. But instead of blaming ourselves or getting even more upset because, you know, this dukkha is unfair, this dukkha was not supposed to come to me, I don't accept this dukkha, I protest this dukkha, I'm going to hold my breath until this dukkha goes away, or I'm going to blame and accuse myself of being a failure or because this dukkha has happened to me. All of those attitudes are just perpetuating the spiral. But if we just admit it and just say, oh, it's painful. Just acknowledge it, just accept it, just receive that suffering. Don't fight it. That suffering has happened because of causes and conditions. And when we're able to relax around it, then it flows through. It flows through and comes to its own natural ending. And then the anatta, or the non-self, for this purpose, just thinking in terms of non-identification, say, it's not mine, it's not myself. So I don't need to identify with this. So you know that, like if you were shopping in the grocery store and there was a parent with a young child and the child was acting out and, you know, having a temper tantrum, you might feel the noise, but you wouldn't be personally disturbed by it. But if you're shopping with your own child and your own child starts to have a temper tantrum in the store in front of people, then you'll be disturbed because you identify with it. This is my child. It's my responsibility. And because of it's mine, then you feel the disturbance and you suffer. Or if I visit another monastery, I can enjoy how beautiful and great that other monastery is. But if I'm here at my own monastery, I notice all the things that should be done that are not yet taken care of. And so my mind is, you know, continuously subject to a disturbance as long as I keep on that misconception that this is my monastery. But if I let go of that and just have the, like a maybe the phrase that one could use is say, it's not personal. So when some suffering comes up and we're finding it like difficult to let go of it, difficult to get out of it, the mind is kind of obsessed and stuck and trapped, then just having that self-talk, it's not personal. And that can bring about that release and breaking the logjam and allowing that bit of dukkha, that clump of dukkha, to pass on and make it possible to let go of it. So in that way, I'm proposing that the right view that you need to get straightened out could be in terms of just taking these two sets of thoughts and undertaking to try it out. See for yourself if this can lead you from affliction to peace, from compulsion to freedom, from suffering to tranquility and calm. There's quite a bit more. I have a whole other talk about wrong views in terms of the wrong views that other schools of thought held at the time of the Buddha. And I have an idea that a lot of us, because of our cultural background, actually deep down, we are holding on to one of these other wrong views. And we should be able to like uncover it, see the danger, and then be willing to let go of those wrong views. I'm not going to address that in this hour, and I'm not sure whether I'll be able to get to it during this retreat, but I will get to it soon, in the next few days, either during this retreat or else next Tuesday. But just taking the Four Noble Truths and the Three Marks of Existence as your operating right view, and just keep on working them again and again and again, and then everything follows from that. As far as practicing at home, well, I just came from a 5 months individual meditation retreat, 4 months of which was happening in the forest, where my only obligation was to go down to the meditation, to the place where the meal was offered, to the meditation yurt at our hermitage in Jenner, to recite a blessing for those who had offered the food and were supporting the hermitage, and to receive the food. Then the rest was all time on my own, free time. It can seem to be boring and nerve-wracking and difficult to have nothing to do. And I encourage you during this little home retreat that you're having, not to quickly start picking up some distraction or running around, but to sit with that potential discomfort of having nothing to do, and just allow it to percolate. Don't have such high expectations of yourself in terms of, oh, I'm going to be doing sitting meditation and walking meditation, and sitting meditation, walking meditation, being upright on the cushion and my mind is going to be focused on the breath or on my object of meditation, and I'm not going to just go off into random thinking about things. I'm just going to be, very strict with it and not waver in order to get the most mileage out of this home retreat. If you can, that's good, do that. But if you can't, that's because of causes and conditions. Don't blame yourself and don't make it into a problem. Instead, just observe what's happening. See, oh, what's it like when my mind wanders? What's it like when I feel distractible? Being gentle with myself. Even if I say, I can't stand it anymore, I need to do something, and then pick up a Dhamma book or something that's inspiring and or read something for a few minutes because you just couldn't stay in meditation. Okay, that's okay. Just do it if you have to. Then come back to the meditation. But be gentle. If the Dhamma is a torture, if the practice is a torture, then it's not going to work for you. So you got to make it something that's has this pleasant aspect. If you don't already, it's very good to set up an altar or a specific place in your home that you use for your sitting meditation. It could have an image of the Buddha, or it could have a flower, or it could have a picture of a teacher or someone who's inspiring to you, or it could be a blank wall, or it could be even looking out the window at something in nature. But having a place, even just a corner in your house that's for meditation, and using it for that purpose and not any other purpose, that helps to helps the mind to settle. Because when you go there, then the mind naturally remembers that's the purpose. Make that space clean and tidy, and make your own body clean and tidy. Make a reminder about your moral precepts that you're committed to, and renew your commitment. Oh, I remember the Buddha advised not killing and not harming, and I'm undertaking that right now. The Buddha advised not stealing, not taking what's not given. I commit to that right now. The Buddha advised not having misconduct with the senses, with the sensual experiences, and I undertake that right now. And so in that way, your body and your mind are all like sort of cleaned up, and it brings a little more formality, and that makes it easier to settle down into the practice. You may try alternating sitting meditation, walking meditation, and mindfully doing chores. Whenever you're doing chores or moving about or going to the toilet or getting out of bed or preparing to sleep, try, if you can, to move more slowly and intentionally, being aware of the movements of the body, being aware of what you intend to do and what you are doing. And then when you're finished doing whatever you're doing, put it down. I suggest including something that's a bit more like a physical exercise, like taking a brisk walk or doing some yoga stretches or doing something that will raise the activity level in the body, and then kind of like noticing what it's like when the heartbeat is faster and when the body's activated that way, and then what it's like when the body is settling down more into tranquility. as to these the practice of mindfulness, when you keep your awareness directed internally, saying, what's up with the body? So what's the posture of the body? Is the body relaxed, or is it tense? Is there pains anywhere in the body, or is the body calm? Seeing the body realistically for what just the way it is. Is the body healthy today? Is the body unhealthy or ill today? Just notice the body. It's just what it is. Just notice it. And then notice the feeling tone that comes along. What's pleasant, what's unpleasant, what's neutral. What's it like right now? And then noticing the state of mind. And this comes to a factor it leads naturally into what's called right effort. I think maybe it was Nisha yesterday mentioned about the akusala dhammas and the kusala dhammas, the wholesome and the unwholesome states of mind. So is the mind calm and in this observing mode? Or is it more activated in thinking and cogitating? Or is it activated in planning something that we want to do next? Just directing awareness back on the mind to say, what's it like when the mind is just being receptive? What's it like when the mind starts to be fabricating different concepts and thoughts? What's it like when the mind is forming some intentions? And whatever we see within those three things, those the state of the body, the state of the feeling, the state of the mind, you could check it out and find out, is it permanent or impermanent? Is it dukkha or is it not dukkha? Or is it constantly changing? Now it's dukkha, now it's not, now it's dukkha, now it's not. Is it personal or impersonal? Is it mine, something that I'm clinging to and identifying with? Or is it not mine, something that I can observe as being just a process of nature, whatever's coming along into this stream of awareness because of the causes and conditions that are present for this bundle of everything that makes up yourself as an individual right now. If the mind is aware, there's still a certain amount of a choice or intention that's happening because the awareness has been directed towards a certain object. Or if it's a thought, the mind is directed towards that thinking, and so on. In leading towards right effort, one can make this question: are these thoughts making my state of mind more settled, more steady, more bright, more clear? Or, alternatively, are these thoughts making awareness more distracted, more obsessed, more agitated, more dull? And one can take another theory that the thoughts that are conducive to that settled, bright, steady, and clear state are the skillful thoughts for right now. And I can favor them. I can notice when they arise. And by favoring them and paying attention to those states, then they become more clear, more bright, more continuous. And then if, on the other hand, it's unskillful Dhamma, because thinking these thoughts just makes me more agitated, more obsessed, or more disappointed, or more upset, I have the option to say, no, thank you. I can choose not to entertain those thoughts. Not to, harshly kick the bad thoughts and throw them in the trash heap and stomp on them and crush them and kill them, but instead with the same kind of like compassion that you might have if you were in the grocery store and your child is having a temper tantrum. You could say, there, it's all right. What are the conditions for this? Just notice it and say, give it a measure of compassion, and then let it go. Turn towards the thoughts that are skillful. So this is my suggestion about a very simple way to straighten out your right view, and taking the right view, the teaching that were being given to you by the Dhamma, by the early Buddhist texts, in the Theravada, what's been passed down. That's the voice of another, the voice of the Buddha. And then can we take that as an invitation to come and see? And can we then work with that inner practice to find out for ourselves, is it true or not true? And does this way of holding it, this way of practicing it, lead towards those skillful qualities coming into existence and being nurtured, cultivated, and developed so that they can become more continuous, more mature, until eventually they come to kind of like a fullness of development, like planting a seed and taking care of the tender little young sapling, and then finally it grows up into a mature tree that has its own strength, its own energy, its own resistance, and then that fully developed, skillful way of thinking then can withstand a lot of pressure, just like a mature tree can stand up to a frost or a storm and still all by itself give delicious and nutritious fruits, right? So that's developing the wholesome, or else denourishing with compassion, denourishing what's unwholesome and just letting it die back and fall back, eventually falling into cessation to a state where those unskillful tendencies cease in a way that they're not coming back again. Now, I'm going to invite your comments or your further questions. If somebody has a comment or a question, please put your hands up, or you could type it into the chat. No, I can see the chat. I see one question already. Dear Ayya, you mentioned the precept of refraining from sensual misconduct. People usually translate it as refraining from sexual misconduct. The correct understanding of this precept. So for a person who's taken 5 precepts during everyday life. Don't use your sexuality to hurt another person. Don't use your sexuality to injure somebody's dignity or to create conflict. In some teachings, other kinds of sensual misconduct like addictive behavior, drinking drugs, addiction to excitement, sometimes can get folded in. It's like closely related to sensual misconduct. Now, while a person is on retreat, it's very normal for them to take 8 monastic precepts. And in that case, they're choosing a brahmacharya, which is abstaining completely from any intentional sexual behavior. So if you're living with your partner, you could decide together that you're going to stay apart for the duration of this retreat and refrain from any kind of intentional sexual behavior. And also, by extension, during retreat, one would give dancing, music shows, entertainment, wearing perfume, beautifying with cosmetics, all of these kinds of behaviors that are designed towards relishing and delight. And as well, one would undertake to avoid using drinks and drugs that cause carelessness. So I didn't go in depth about the 8 precepts for being on retreat, or the 8 monastic precepts, but now those 3 come together in a bundle. Thank you for that question. Okay, Maureen.
Okay, I'm unmuted, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. I remember when I very first went to the Bhavana Society with where Bhanteji is, and there were 2 things that really stuck in my mind. One was that on the wall, there was is it the Kalama Sutta?
Mm-hmm.
Where he invites the people to try it out and see if what will help and what won't help and that kind of thing. And the other one, there was something from the Dhammapada, and it's, I know the quotation. It was about, by ourselves is evil done. By ourselves become we pure. No one saves us but ourselves, and no one can, and no one may. Buddhas merely show the path. We ourselves must walk the way. And when I saw those 2 things, that's when I became Buddhist in my own way. And I think in a nutshell, what you said is about that. You have the choices, and you just try things out to see which works for you in a practical way in your life. And that's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you, Maureen, for that.
It's been very helpful listening to you, and because I still have problems, at my age, of course I do, but it's given me a way of trying to tackle things and that sort of thing. So thank you.
Well, this is just what I was trying to say, and your affirmation from your own experience is so helpful. I may have to quote you in the future. Damon. Damon.
Thank you. This morning, I had a very hard time being just quiet. And I'm used to on Saturday morning, this is the weekend, and this is the time to, catch up with stuff. In particular, I wanted to talk to my mother and her husband because they're older and feeble, and I wanted them to enjoy it, but also I also really was happy that I did not just be condemned to walking and meditating. I find that to be torturous at the moment. In the afternoon, I thought after your talk, perhaps between the 2.5 hours that we have, would it be okay if instead, while I walk or sit, would it be acceptable to listen to a Dharma talk, perhaps yours, as a way of avoiding the torture of the boredom and so forth? Is that just a way to cheat, listening to a Dharma talk while I walk or sit for 2.5 hours shortly?
Mm-hmm. What a wonderful question. Thank you so much. So take it little by little. Do as much as you can. If you can stay with sitting or walking for a while until it becomes difficult, and then stay with it a little bit longer. And then when the tortuous boredom becomes so obstructive that actually it's like you're hurting yourself instead of helping yourself, because this, what you're describing is maybe more psychological, but people very often have this with physical pain. So while sitting in meditation, they experience physical pain, and up to a point, it's useful to just bear up and just relax and say, okay, that's painful, and just don't move, but just stay with it. But then if it becomes so disruptive that you're not really meditating, then you need to move the body and shift to a different posture or do something to get out of that physical pain. And this is the same way that on a self-retreat, a person can ruin it for themselves by being too harsh and hard on themselves. So don't do that, but also, push yourself a little bit beyond your comfort level, and then be very clear, like what you're deciding to do. Say, now I'm going to listen to a Dhamma talk, something like that. It very often happens that good intentions come up, like we may be like, I remember something that happened with somebody, and I want to talk to them to tell them how much I care, or I need to apologize for something, or when those intentions and thoughts come along, while on a formal retreat, if possible, to make a good note, this is a good intention, and then set it aside and take care of following up with it later on. It may be that, when we're like fully integrated, we don't like a formal, being in formal retreat or out of retreat, it's all flows together because our life is just practicing in different postures. And then the process of having something come along, we realize some good intention, like taking care of our parent. And then we are aware of that, how it is to hold with that intention, and then following through on it and being aware how it is in following through with it. If you would practice, especially loving kindness towards your parent, towards your mother or your father, your parents, And just bring into the part of the daily practice, may my parents be well and happy, may they be peaceful, may they realize their highest aspirations, and may they also have the patience, courage, understanding, and determination to overcome all the inevitable problems and difficulties in life. And just keep giving that thought for your parents. And then if you've done that as your meditation first, then later on when you speak to them, you can find that conditioning, you've conditioned your mind, and you may find that it has a very good effect on what happens when you speak with them. I'm going to call on Ren.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ayya. This morning, in the morning recitation, I remember that there's a list of things that are impermanent, and one of them, towards the end of the list, there's one that says mind is impermanent, and right underneath that, probably the last part, was that consciousness is impermanent. And I've been just exposed to so many different ideas, so I apologize if I'm still not clear. Is non-dualism Buddha's teaching? Because in my idea of what non-duality is, that consciousness is the intrinsic value of everything. So that's my first question. I guess I'm confused about that. And then, if indeed it is Buddha's teaching of non-dualism, then is it a matter of language for the way consciousness is interpreted or translated? And then the last part is that the idea of refuge, I think my mind, or whoever I am, seeks some kind of stability as a refuge, right? If there's no permanence, if there's impermanence, what is it that I can cling to? Well, obviously I can't cling to anything, but where do we find stability is my confusion. Thank you.
This is another great question, and I think I may bracket your question about non-dualism and try to address that in another session. Why? In the Advaita Vedanta, which is part of the Indian school of thought that evolved from Brahmanism. Actually, it co-evolved like Buddhism and Brahmanism co-evolved. So there's been a lot of interactions between Buddhism and Hinduism throughout the many centuries of Indian culture. But non-dualism has a specific meaning in the Advaita Vedanta, which is not the same thing as the Buddhist taught. It has to do with how we identify consciousness as being a self. So the Buddha taught that consciousness arises moment by moment. It's connected with our senses, our sensory capacity, and the ability of the mind or the knowing faculty to be directed towards sensual contact or sensory contact. And then there's this moment by moment that there's a visual object, visual consciousness, which is capable of cognizing a visual object, and then the sense faculty, the seeing faculty, which is the eye and that aspect of the brain, which is involved with cognizing something visual. And then those three things are coming together, and then there's like a moment of seeing, a contact, and then from that arises our pleasant, unpleasant feelings and our perceptions and the whole stream of experience. But it's because at the Buddha's time, people had the idea that consciousness or the mind was something permanent and not changing that you could cling to and take refuge in. The Buddha was trying to get us off of that idea because clinging to that idea doesn't do the job. It's unsuccessful. So it's not that the Buddha was teaching dualism, but rather that he was teaching that the idea of a pure eternal consciousness, it's very related to your other question about taking refuge, finding something that's stable and that you can take refuge in, that's stable and permanent and blissful. So it's not the answer that's what you can cling to. So taking refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, this is sort of like it's almost like a transitional stage while we are still not yet enlightened, not yet awake, still subjected to our emotions, subjected to so much confusion, so much. Then those three aspects are something outside of ourself, which has got both stability and goodness, and we can hold on to that. Especially the Dhamma, the Dhamma is a raft. And while we're trying to get across the river, we're supposed to hold on to the raft. We're supposed to take refuge in the raft and use the raft for getting across the river. But nevertheless, we know that the raft is not eternal, not permanent, it's subject to change. And when we've finished the work and reach the other side, then we can leave it and go on our way. And we won't need it anymore. So it is possible to take refuge. It is possible to hold on to whatever teaching helps you and works for you. And then, but don't, this idea of the permanent, pure, true self that's taught in non-dualism is actually not the Buddhist idea. He just said, just practice take these Four Noble Truths and these three marks and try them out and just practice with them. And don't worry about like trying to find some ultimate reality to hang on to.
Okay, I understand the idea of seeking refuge now. What I don't see is what's on the other end after we use the raft to cross. I mean, that's still unclear to me, but I think I just want to say that, but I don't need it to be addressed. I just want to put it out there.
Thank you. And you know what? It may be that over the time in the practice that like a view of this nibbana or the unconditioned or that which is beyond this ever-changing conditioned world may be very unclear. When I first encountered the Dhamma, it was very unclear to me. I would skip those parts. In the sutras, I would come to the part about nibbana and I would just kind of, skim over it because it didn't mean a thing to me. And then it's only been like later, a lot of time, a lot of practice. And then eventually it becomes, like the light at the end of the tunnel or like the North Star or like something that has got more clarity. We may circle back again to that idea. I so much appreciate when people sharing with a sincerity and honesty from their experience. I'm going to read off one more comment from Patipada. Thank you, Ayya, for sharing your wisdom and inspiring insights. Metta, integrated into all your teaching, continues to help guide and support my practice. and thank you. So I think that may be enough for this session. We've come to our time. May the merits of all of our efforts be for the benefit of our own welfare, happiness, peace, tranquility, freedom, and ultimate liberation. And may we also share the merits of our practice with all beings.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Ayya.